Okay, we are going to look at Gomel Chasadim Tovim. And if you remember, that's sort of in the middle of this phrase that we were claiming was carved up. We had El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, V'Konei Hakol. We spent a lot of time on El Elyon and Konei Hakol. So now we're going to do Gomel Chasadim Tovim. Now, the first question you have to ask about Gomel Chasadim Tovim, which you could translate as like bestow or, performs acts of chesed, of loving kindness, is why do you have to modify chasadim with the word tovim? Like, is there such a thing as a bad chesed, such that you would have to modify it as to make sure everybody understands that this is a good chesed, chasadim tovim? This is something that has vexed a number of people over the years. And one understanding is that it's like something like a hendiades, which is something like where you use two words to describe one concept, like I feel nice and warm. So, you don't really need the nice part of nice and warm. You just feel warm, but maybe you sort of, it sounds better. So that's, one possibility. I wanted to look at one other possibility, which is the use of the word chesed, where it actually means something bad. And thus you would need to modify it with the word good, just to make sure we understand what we're talking about here. So we're going to do this, get this part out of the way, and then I'm going to show you where this phrase comes from. In Vayikra, we read in chapter 20, in part of the lists of the forbidden relationships, if a man marries his sister, the daughter of either his father or his mother, so that he sees her nakedness and she sees his nakedness, it is a disgrace. Chesed hu. They shall be excommunicated in the sight of their kinsfolk. He has uncovered the nakedness of his sister. He shall bear his guilt. So you have to ask, why do they use the word chesed? Rashi explains chesed hu lashon arami cherpa. Okay, so maybe this chesed has something to do with shame, cherpa, and apparently in Aramaic that's chasuda, cherpa. So maybe if you were in an Aramaic speaking context, if you said just the word chesed, you might get confused. Maybe you have this pasuk running in the back of your head. So chasadim tovim. Okay, that was a suggestion that was made by Judah Golden in the 1990s. So we don't exactly know, but just to note that it is strange that we're having this extra word tovim, gomel chasadim tovim. We don't say zocher chasdei, tovim shala avot. We just say chasdei avot. Okay, so where does this phrase come from? As I noted, it's not in the Eretz Yisrael version of this bracha. It's only in the Bavel version of the bracha, and it's something that interrupts our phrase El Elyon Konei Hakol. It actually shows up in the Talmud in two places, and that's what I wanted to look at with you, both related to other brachot that we say. So the first place it shows up is in the list of brachot that you say in the morning. When you wake up, we call it Birchot HaShachar. So you say, Pokeach Ivrim, Albish Arumim, all these acts that you say when you wake up in the morning. Now we say them in the synagogue all stacked together. The last in that list is Hamavir Chavlei Sheina Me'enai, or Hamavir Sheina Me'enai, Utenuma Me'afapai. Blessed is God who removed sleep, from my eyes and slumber from my eyelids. Okay, and then we have a request that follows that bracha that asks God basically to keep me on the straight path today, connect me to your mitzvot, don't let me sin, let my yetzer, serve you as opposed to doing something wrong, and then we have towards the end, utneni hayom uv'chol yom l'cheinu l'chesed l'rachamim beinecha u'v'nei kol. This is, when we say it in Shul, it's made plural. It's neinu b'nei kol ro'enu, but in the Gemara, it's originally just an individual blessing you would say when you wake up and you rub the sleep out of your eyes, and you ask for everybody to give me a chesed, that I should be seen as chesed in front of them. V'tigmaleni chasadim tovim. Here's the chasadim tovim, shows up right there in that bracha. And then Baruch Atah Hashem, Gomel Chasadim Tovim Le'amo Yisrael. And again, that's the bracha that we still say today in the morning brachot. There are some manuscripts that actually don't even have Le'amo Yisrael. They just have Gomel Chasadim Tovim. So you could imagine that might have been something that was floating around that then sort of gets sucked into our Amidah blessing, even though it has its own context of waking up and asking for God to grant favor among all the people that we meet today. So I guess the question on the table is, what characterizes God's acting, Gomel Chasadim Tovim? One answer could be by making sure that the people that we interact with today see us in a sort of lens of chesed. So the Gomel Chasadim Tovim here is sort of like God helping us orchestrate the relationships between one another, such that we see each other and are seen in a way that is sort of on the chesed side of the spectrum, as opposed to the opposite, let's say. There's another context in the Gemara that I wanted to bring in as well, which we know it as benching Gomel, Birkat Gomel, where you say if you have encountered some sort of dangerous journey and you made it through the other side. The Gemara actually lists out the 4 times when you would bench Gomel. The Gomel text that we have is not the one that's in the printed versions of the Gemara. The one that's in the printed versions of the Gemara, as we'll see, is Gomel Chasadim Tovim. But just to remind ourselves of what the situation is here, that you've survived, you made it through. So there are 4 categories, Arba'at Tzrichin Lahodot, the 4 that have to offer some sort of thanks or praise. If remember, our bracha is part of the praise section of the Amidah. So this is also one of the sort of core phrases, I guess, of how you say a praise to God. So who offers praise to God? Yordei Hayam, those who have gone on a sea journey. Holchei Midbarot, those who have crossed the desert. Okay, so you've made some sort of massive journey. This is not just crossing the street or even going to the next town. This is like really going on a journey. Mishaya Choleh B'Nikra Peh, somebody who was sick and then got healed. Umishaya Chavush B'Veit HaAsurim V'Yatsa, and someone who was in jail and made it out. Okay, so those are the 4 categories of when you would offer a blessing. And then we have the Gemara just straight out asks, so of all these categories, my nevarech, so how are you supposed to do the lehodot? It says you have to offer thanks. So how do you do that? What's the bracha that you say? Amar Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda here gives us the formula. Rabbi Yehuda throughout the Gemara gives many formulas of blessings. And he says, Baruch Gomel Chasadim Tovim. Okay, now that's and Baruch here is just an ellipsis. So you've got your Shem and Malchut, Gomel Chasadim Tovim. What does it mean for God to be Gomel Chasadim Tovim? It means for God to have saved me from these dangerous things that I survived. Okay, the being sick and getting better, making it out of jail, crossing dangerous places on a long journey. All that, the fact that I made it through, is an example of God being Gomel Chasadim Tovim. So these are things that we can sort of have in mind as we say Gomel Chasadim Tovim in the everyday in the Amidah, not just as a special experience of Birkat HaGomel, but that's something that we have sort of available to us, every day. One of the everyday salvations that we've gone through that would occasion us to say Gomel Chasadim Tovim. I'm going to just put one last text on the list here, which is the drasha that explains that God is doing Gemilut Chasadim. God is Gomel Chasadim. Here we don't have Tovim, but I think it's sort of related throughout the Torah, and this sort of famous midrash of Rabbi Simlai that says that the Torah is both in the beginning and the end of it an example of Gemilut Chasadim. But these are Gemilut Chasadim that God does to people. The beginning is when Tchilata Gemilut Chasadim, when God makes for Adam and Chava the kutnot or these clothings of skin and dresses them. So it's giving clothes to the naked. That's the Gemilut Chasadim. And the end of the Torah is when God buries Moshe in the valley by Boroto Bagai. So that's the end of Gemilut Chasadim, when you do the act of burying someone. And these are 2 sort of headliner examples of what it means for God to do Gomel Chasadim, which sort of characterize our Torah. So I think the idea of what we're referring to when we say about God Gomel Chasadim Tovim in our Amidah, either could be these sort of experiences that I made through that I survived, these difficult journeys or health experiences, or captured. I was captured and I was set free. You could take that metaphorically. All of that could be referred to as Gomel Chasadim Tovim, or it could just be the sort of more simple Gemilut Chasadim of clothing the naked, burying the dead, all the ways in which we feel cared for when we are in need. And those are obviously things that not only God does for us, but that we are meant to follow in God's ways and do for others. And so I think that's sort of what I'm taking away from Gomel Chasadim Tovim is either it's the gratitude that we offer God for all the salvations that we have experienced, or the role modeling that God plays for us when God, modeled in the Torah of clothing the naked and burying the dead, so too we are meant to do that to others.